Masachet Menahot Daf Chav Bet Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top. So we said before yesterday's daf that when we used to use wood from the Bet HaMikdash to burn personal korbanot, and now we're going to say, but I think the led the time of the Mishal Sibor. So we said that obviously you use wood for personal korbanot from the Bet HaMikdash. Minan how you know this from? The Tanabrit says, Yachol ha'omer alai olav. Someone says, you know what, I'm going to want to bring in olav. Same way he brings the libations from his house, maybe he would also bring the wood from his house. The Pasuk says, Al ha'etzim asher al ha'esh asher al ha'mizbeach. Ma mizbeach mishas sibor, from the community. Af ha'etzim ve'esh mishas, so the fire and the wood is from the community. Divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, that's according to Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon, he says different explanation. Ma mizbeach shalon shemesh b'ad, just like a mizbeach. A regular guy can't use it. Af ha'etzim ve'esh shalon shemesh b'neged, so a wood and fire also cannot be used by a regular person. The Gemara says, "Ma'benau," which is two opinions. Ikbenau, how does the difference is whether or not new wood. According to Rabbi Shimon, if it's new, it's good because it was never used before. According to Rabbi Shimon, it still doesn't make a difference. One second, old wood can't be used from the Be'ach. But says Aravna El David. So Aravna was telling the Melech, I see that you want the location where I live, where the Tamitash is going to be. Fantastic. He tells them, animals take wood. So what do we see? Old wood can be used for a korbanot. The Gemara says, "Hachanami hartina" was new wood. The Gemara says, "My moragim." What does it mean that he says take the moragim? Ma'ulullah says, "Mitash turba la turba ber." My mitash ber was that. Marvida izad the kurkisha, a weight that's used for goats that has like a board with spikes in the bottom. Then when you thresh the grain, it becomes threshed well. Mamar Yisrael says, "My Krab, where we know this pasuk that this means threshing. Okay, new Mishnah. If someone has a korban minha with the kometz, becomes mixed with another kometz of another minha. Minha is a kohanim mixed with the kohen's minha. Minha is kohen Mashiach, kohen gadol's minha. Minha nasachim, the minha of a libation which gets burnt. Kishada o kasher. Rabbi Damir says, "B'minhat kohen Mashiach minha kazayim psula." If it mixed with the kohen minha or kohen gadol minha, it's pasul. Shezub b'data ava, because the kometz is thick of flour and oil. V'zu b'data rabka, and the kohen's and the kohen gadol is much thinner. It's made of just flour and oil, lightly. V'en ba'ozo, and therefore they'll absorb. So the thick ones won't absorb. That's why it's kasher. Thin ones will absorb, and therefore it's pasul. The Mishnah says, "Dam sheda'are b'tamim b'mayim." Blood from the korban that becomes mixed with water. Im yesh b'marit dam kasher. If it still looks like blood, it's kasher. Neda'are b'yayin, if it could mix with wine. We consider it as if it's still water. And therefore, if it's still enough blood, it still looks like blood, it is not batel and it's kasher. If the sacrificial blood became mixed with the blood of a non-kadosh animal or a wild beast, kosher. Might also consider water, and therefore it depends on the appearance. Rabbi Damir says, one blood is not nullified the other, and therefore it's still kasher, no matter what it looks like. Both opinions learned from the same pasuk. We had this before, it should sound familiar. If not, it's okay. We do the daf for the daf. To do it daily. We take the blood from the bull and the blood from the goat to put on Be'ach's horns. Now we know that the blood of the bull is more than the blood of the goat. And still, we call it separately, blood and goat, blood and bull. Seemingly, it still retains what it is. Rabbanan Sabri Hamim hold, we can see that from here, whatever comes back, become nullified. We see from here that something that's mixed with something that is own type does not become nullified. Right? There's a concept between min b'mino, min b'mino. If I have A that mixes with B, if they're the same thing, does that help the nullification? Can it become batel or not? Or vice versa? If I have A that's not similar to B, but it's different, does it become nullified or not? We said before, say that if it goes, whatever comes past does not become nullified. Why is that the case? Maybe it's like what Rabbi says that because it's mixed with its own kind, and that does not become nullified. The Gemara says, he only mentioned that concept of something mixed with its own type does not become nullified. Not that we said now with the mizbeach's factor. Then yes, true, that's what would be good to say. But once the pasuk mentions stuff and goes in beach, must be that's the factor. The Gemara says, maybe it's both factors. The fact that it's mixing with its own type and that it's going to the bath, the Gemara says, kasha, good question. Now we're going to go backwards. Now Rabbi Yehuda, who says Mikan Minam that he says, oh, it's because of Min Mino mixing with its own kind, it's not become nullified. Maybe it's because of that's why it's not mixed. It's like Hamid said the Marsan Iyash Min Olin Min Mino Mino Gemart Hashish Min Mino Mishum Mino and I say that if it only mentions Olin, fine, but it says also the fact because own kind, that's why. Now we're gonna ask the reverse question. Vidima Adaika Min Mino Vilin. Maybe it's also because same question maybe it's both factors. It's the own type and it goes in Zbeach. Where it says Kasha. Okay. Going forward, Tanakh says it. Says if the comments became mixed with the minha of the Kohen's minha or Nesachim minha, it's pasul. Because this is thick and this is thin and they'll mix. Who cares if they absorb? Maybe know who is the same type of kind and therefore should not become nullified according to Bidah. The Gemara says, holds, anything that has its own type and something it can, if A is mixes with B and they're similar, but there's also a third factor, C, that's not the same. We look at B as if it's not there, even though it's similar. Therefore, C, which is not its kind, therefore can nullify A. So, since in our case there's the oil of the Nesachim is the same, that's A plus B, but the C is the third factor, the flour is different, that's why we look like it's a totally new mixture. Okay, Itmar said, if you have the comments of a sinner's minha that became oiled, which wasn't supposed to, this is no, a person actually should rub the oil on the comets and offer them the Zbeach. So therefore, it's still kasher. Gemara says, Vakti Pasus says, Lo yasim alei Hashem lo yitin alei anivah. But Pasus clearly says, don't put oil. The Gemara says, Ha'ush lo yikba alei Hashem in b'chavruta. That means you should not put oil in it like a regular mincha. Like, don't pour it, but you could smoosh it on. You rub it on. Like 1 second. Etivei, Rabbi Yochanan Lashkish, Harav shnit arav b'balul. If a dry mincha that became mixed with an oiled mincha, Yakriv, you should bring the Zbeach. Rabbi Yochanan says, Lo yakriv. You should not bring it in the Zbeach. What's the dry one? I'm going to have a sinner. It becomes mixed with the regular one. We see from here that any oil makes a pasul. The Gemara says, La. What does dry mean? Minha parim ve'elim minha kvasim. Minha nesachim of bulls or rams that became mixed with the lambs. Why is that considered wet and not wet? Because the ram one, the nesachim, has only a third. It has 4 lugin of oil compared to the 2 isaron of flour. So therefore the ratio is 2 lugin per isaron. The lamb, however, has a 3 lugin for 1 isaron. So therefore, comparatively, the ram is drier to the lamb. But does not mean talking about a case of a minhat hoteh, which has practically nothing. The Gemara says, what's the Brett says outright? Minhat parim ve'elim ki minhat b'minhat kivasim. The minhat of a bull or ram that becomes to the lamb. V'harav is a little, or and if a dry one becomes to the wet one. Yakriv, you bring it. Therefore, talking about 2 different cases. You can't say the same case. The Gemara says, okay, perushe kamefarish. Yes, it is talking about the same case. They said both, not as separate cases, but explained it. Meaning, if the bull mixes with the lamb, which is dry mixing with wet, it should still be brought. Not as separate cases like we thought before. Okay. Bayra says, the comment, if you squeeze the oil onto the wood, then you put the comment on top of that wood. Is that considered like there's no oil in it? Let me just say that since it's attached, it's considered like it's going together, and therefore it's kasher. Therefore it's not. Maybe it's pasul. Where it says, isn't that same machlokes Reish Lakish and Yochanan? The Talmud says, if someone puts a limb that does not have kazayit meat on it, and the bone is attached to it, creates a kazayit. Rabbi Yochanan says Yechayav because not good enough. Reish Lakish it's considered attached, and therefore you did it outside, and therefore Yechayav. Reish Lakish you're not patur. It's attached, it's not considered combined, and therefore it's considered less than anxiety outside the penalty, you're patur. Seemingly same machlokes. Mine says no. Still a question of Yochanan, still a question of Reish Lakish. Still a question of Yochanan, because even though the bone is attached to the meat, it's still considered part of the meat. The only time machlokes where Yochanan says attached is because by the bone, the meat not basarhu, because the bone comes with the meat. It's the same item. in essence. אבל אחד לאו מן העקום, so לא, in the case of the oil squeezed out, it's not the same thing, and therefore it won't be considered attached when you bring it together. Or Dima, maybe the opposite. I feel Rish Lakish lo come out of the maybe Rish Lakish said it's not attached by the bone, is because the because that's technically separated. Right? You don't need the bone to be there, and therefore if separated, it's still good. That's why it's not clean attached. But the oil, which you do need part of it, you want it to be part of it, maybe that won't be considered separated. And therefore, if you bring it together, it's considered attached. Maybe there is no difference, and the same opinion would apply. We don't know either way, and therefore the Gemara answers take.